This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1042, Book of the Month Club, Spider-Man, The Mark of Kaine.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Clone Madness continues to unfold as the spectacular and amazing web of stories rage on. One man, focused on responsibility but looking more forward to his future as a father. Another man has finally come to terms with who he is despite the jealousy of who he wants to be. Then, just to stir the pot a little bit more, another Peter Parker comes into play. The Jackal continues to hunt our heroes while Kaine steps out of the shadows and assaults our heroes with his unknown agenda. Then in the midst of all the ruckus, another truly heartbreaking moment will hit home for our spiders and their family. Who's telling the truth anymore? Why did JR draw long hair in one random issue? Does everyone remember the menace as Skorez? Hang on, true believers. Comic Shenanigans is proud to present the next chapter in our Clone Saga review series, full of marks and mirrors and pawns. Oh my.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul Skorez. This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1042, Book of the Month Club, Spider-Man, The Mark of Kaine. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. I'm joined by the dulcet tones of Paul Skorez that we just heard, as well as Nathan Struck. Say hello, Nathan.
Hi, hello.
So,
dulcet tones.
We're back once again to talk about the Clone Saga. Next episode, we're going to be taking a break, so you're going to have to get as much Clone Saga goodness as possible right now. We're talking about the period when Aunt May dies, Peter goes to jail, and Freakface makes his debut. Before he gets a better name later, kind of. It's arguable. So I have to ask, we've been going through these issues. Did you guys read these in and around original publication, or is this much later when you kind of went back to fill in the blanks on Ben?
There's some stuff here I vaguely remember, like even based on some of the covers, I had this one, that one.
Mm-hmm.
But again, my collecting was very disjointed at the time, so I don't even think I actually read 400 when it came out. So I think I would argue this might be my first time even reading it during this run. But there were a few books that, there was some familiarity with the content.
Nate?
Not for me. I'm just kind of glancing back through the collection. I've read this collection before, but in terms of owning any of these issues in singles, I'm just kind of flipping through. I don't think there's a single one. I own a bunch now, but you're asking about back in the day, so no, I didn't read. Oh no, okay, I'm sorry. There's one, and it's unlimited, the unlimited issue. In the back of our collection, our Clone Saga Complete Collection. This is Unlimited 9. So yes, I did have Spider-Man Unlimited 9, which doesn't really add a whole lot to like the overall storyline going on here. So I don't know that it would have helped me get a sense of what the Spider books were like really at the time.
And obviously, like Web 124 is the piece of art you guys got me a few years back there for my birthday gift.
That's right. It's a good issue. So I don't think I had any of these issues at the time either. I think I probably read them a couple years late. It was probably around 97, I would want to say. I had a friend who bought a bunch of the Clone Saga stuff, so I definitely read a bunch of his issues. I wasn't buying Amazing Spider-Man regularly till literally the month after the Clone Saga ended, although I had sporadic issues prior. But I remember a lot of the art here I remember seeing in a Spider-Man card series that Fleer Ultra put out. I think it was like 90... I guess it had to be 96, because I remember they had like a Smoke and Mirrors event card. They had a Pursuit event card, like relatively recent storylines that they were recapping. So that's a lot of where my original knowledge of these things came from. And then I remember, I think it was probably 96 or 97, buying a lot of these in cheap back issue bins at sales at Silver Snail at the like, and kind of filling in this Clone Saga period. So in terms of the actual issues as they were coming out, I probably didn't read many of them. Now, Paul, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit from where we actually are going to be, but this was your first time reading 400?
I think so.
Wow, that's a seminal story. I mean, it'd be more seminal if, it wasn't an actress.
Getting ahead of ourselves, but I'm glad that you are. I mean, you are rightfully so upset about the retcon, and I am too. It's
interesting because I wouldn't care if it was a bad issue, but 400 was, I always thought it was a beautiful issue. What I always appreciated about, and again, I'm jumping way ahead, but what I always loved about 400 is that Aunt May did not die, spoilers, in a way that it was anything that Peter could blame himself for. Because that would have been too trite and too typical, which is kind of what we got later with Back in Black, with her getting shot because of him, right? So, whereas this was natural causes, she was old. She was not in the best of health and hadn't been for years, and so she eventually died, and coming to grips with that, I thought was a much more mature story, because it wasn't your typical, she died because of a supervillain, or anything to do with any of his antics. It was completely divorced from that, and so it felt like a very real moment in this person's life, although everything around it is crazy. His clone is up on the roof crying, like, that's not normal, but him, being and embracing his aunt, his mother figure, as she dies, was incredibly emotional and very realistic in terms of what that emotion would feel. Like JMD has said, that's one of the best stories he ever wrote, and I would agree with that, because it was really genuine to the character.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a very powerful story. Like, obviously, I know that, Aunt May lives on later on in the timeline, I guess. But reading it, I don't remember how they brought her back or retconned it or whatever it was. So I read it kind of, with a, ignoring the fact that I know she survives this somehow. But yeah, the whole thing was pieced together very well. I love that, you have the big hit of emotion, and you have, how Peter reacts to it, and, he comes at peace with it and tells her, follow the star to the right and turn, and, you have Ben crushed on the roof as well, and, like, everyone, like, feels the raging effects of it. I don't love, obviously, how they pivot really hard, and they're at a memorial, and then he gets arrested out of the blue. That whole thing seems so ridiculous. I know they had to, I guess, move the story along, but I think you could have totally hopped to the next, like, a whole different, I don't know, I get weird. I just didn't like that part of it. That bugged me a lot. Because it really, I don't know, cheapened the whole thing. But it's like, okay, we gotta move on, guys, so let's just, throw this weird arrest.
That was a very specific choice that they made. And again, in the Life of Riley archives, they talk about this and how they did it as more of a, they thought, if they just kind of ended there, that would be a great jumping off point for a lot of people. And they didn't want that. They didn't want you to feel like, oh, Aunt May's dead, it's a sad moment, maybe I could just stop reading Spider-Man. Like, they were worried about that being an idea, because I'm just saying, because it's 400 issues, it kind of ends that story with a bow in terms of Aunt May. So they're like, well, we gotta add something that makes you want to come back and not leave. And so that's why they kind of threw in that last couple pages.
You could cliffhangered it way differently, I think, more effectively than having him arrested in the middle of his
But what says
funeral.
What says a soap opera more than death and arrests? That's very soap operatic. It's not X-Men soap opera, but it's very much a Spider-Man type of soap opera.
Fair enough. You're right. It bugged me. I just threw it out there.
No, you're not wrong, because it is a very hard, especially because you get these beautiful pages by Mark Bagley where JMD just, knows when to not over script, and he just lets the art tell the story. So you get these beautiful pages of just emotion, and so to your point, it does feel like in some ways it undercuts that, because you're right, you immediately go into a dun 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 after this very emotional, heartfelt, genuine feeling moment. But so let's go back. So I jumped us forward, let's jump back. So we're talking about these things that are these issues that we're talking about are in January 95. So I just want to mention, do you have any ideas what the top grossing film of January 1995 was?
Why don't you tell us that? I'm dying to know.
95 top grossing
in January.
I mean, that's not really a strong month for movies either, so no, I can't.
It's not. It was actually released the month earlier, so it was still strong, still doing really well. It was a Jim Carrey film. Any guesses?
Mask?
Nope.
Ace Ventura?
Nope.
Liar, Liar?
Nope, that was too early.
before Ace.
I think it's after Ace Ventura, but it's before Liar Liar. Liar Liar is like 97.
And before or after The Mask?
This is after The Mask, I believe.
Jesus. Ace Ventura 2.
Nope. Co-starring Jeff Daniels.
Oh, Dumb and Dumber.
There you go. Also on the list here, we've got Legends of the Fall, Disclosure, Higher Learning, and The Jungle Book. Which, I guess that was a re-release for The Jungle Book? Oh no, that was some sort of reimagining. I don't even remember it. And it's did not do well. Even I don't remember it. I will say, number 12 this month, Street Fighter.
Oh, Van Damme Street Fighter?
Yeah.
I mean, of those coming home. He's coming with me!
Most of the movies, that's the one I'd be most likely to want to watch and rewatch, so that's interesting.
It's so bad.
Not that interesting, yeah. It's not good, but it's fun to watch.
Change channel.
Yeah. What's crazier to me is that looking at this list is the number 16 film that month was actually, they were talking about January 95. It was actually released in June the prior year. Was still making bank, was The Lion King.
Wow.
You can't kill the king.
Hey, which is the, I guess, better or worse, so bad it's good fighting movie? Street Fighter or the second Mortal Kombat?
I think Street Fighter is more entertaining.
I would go with that too, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll say the top or most watched TV show of January 95 was the medical drama ER.
Love that show. It's a good show.
Did you?
Oh yeah, we go back and watch it all the time.
Really? I did not.
Medical.
I'm learning something. I'm learning something new about Paul today. I did not know that you were an ER fan.
Love ER. Absolutely love ER. Gotta love Goose, man.
Wow. All right. Did you know that, Nate? No. Untold Facets. That's what this is all about.
ER? Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is great. All right, so let's pick up from before where we were before. We had two back-to-back stories of Peter and Ben having adventures adjacent to each other, but not ever meeting each other, which was so bizarre. So finally, we get to actually see them come together. So we have the 3-part Smoke and Mirrors story, which is kind of crazy because I have a lot of questions about things that don't really make sense. We start in Web of Spider-Man 122. We move on to Amazing Spider-Man 399, and then we end in Spider-Man 56. So this is the first time since we kind of started the Clone Saga where they don't have a neat 4-issue kind of block that uses up each of the titles, where we actually kind of end off on an odd note. Because everything prior to this, we had either a 4-part storyline in Power and Responsibility, and then we had the books kind of breaking off and having 4 chapters in 2 books, and then that was mirrored by the other 2. So this time we actually have a 3-parter, then we have a 2-parter, then we have a death, and then we have, so it's kind of throwing off the rhythm, I would say. And I think it starts to become evident that they had more of a plan, and it starts to feel a little bit more haphazard. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I don't get that necessarily from breaking up the format. I think when you sell a story in 4, you sell more books, is the theory. And I without knowing more about behind-the-scenes editorial conversations, also, we do know this, right, about like interviews and also our own surmising, and also from your recent interview as well with DeMatteis. When you are writing as part of a storyline and there's 4 other writers, it takes something out of it. Like, it wasn't as enjoyable for the writers. Like, I don't get this. This isn't my baby. I don't get to do especially if like you're always doing the beginning, or you're always doing the middle, or you're always whatever. And so maybe there's a feeling about lackluster storytelling, or maybe the authors were the writers were asking to kind of get a bit of control, or I don't really know the full background, but that didn't signal to me that they didn't really understand what they were doing. A lot of the stuff that is just the throwaway fluff to me is the classic. We talked about soap operas before, and I guess I'll weigh in just really quickly on the 400 reveal or twist at the end. I like a good soap opera in my comics. You know, I'm a huge X-Men fan. I love when Peter and Ben and Mary Jane, they're getting into the soap opera stuff. So I'm happy to see that. But I don't know, something about Scryer just appearing out of nowhere, and he's like, it's a Tuxedo Mask effect, right? A mysterious person appears, they do a mysterious thing, they don't tell you your name, or they do tell you the name, and it's like everyone's comic is their first comic. So like for months, they're just like, we don't really seem to have a plan what to do with Scryer, but let's have him appear almost every month or every other month, so that if anyone's reading, they'll know that there's a guy in a dark cloak who hangs out, right? And then on top of that, you have Kaine, and Kaine's doing his appearances, right? So there's multiple Tuxedo Masks just constantly appearing and muttering things from rooftops. And again, if you read one comic in 6 months and you saw it, I guess you're fine. But in terms of pacing, I'm happy to see the stories kind of move at a little faster clip. Like, here's a done in 2, and we're going to move on. And yeah, it's still a little tropey with some of these appearances, but it makes it pick up the pace a little bit more. So I'm happy to see it, but I guess it never really screamed to me that they don't. I never really feel like they know what's going on. Like I never in any instance do I feel like this was planned for a year ahead of time. And flying by the seat of your pants is the nature of the beast in many ways for comic books, monthly comics, especially at the time. But it's certainly the downside of these stories, right? There's great art from time to time. The Butler art, especially in the first issue we're talking about, is some of my favorite Butler art. And you get some good characterization here and there, but for the most part, it's rightly earned its reputation for being kind of a mess. So there it is.
Yeah, this Web 122 stuff is unreal. Like, this opening splash page of Ben hopping out here, and then mirrors it with Peter at the back of it, right? It's the same exact pose and image, right? Which I thought was super awesome. Like, give me this thing. I was blown away by this is primetime 90s style art Scarlet Spider. This splash page him coming off. I think there's another couple of pages in. He's swinging in the woods there, and there's another similar pretty awesome. Sorry, my background is. You guys have your epics. It's fine. And then you have a mix of some fun stuff in here. Where are Peter and MJ going for lunch? That they are dressed to the nines for lunch. You know,
is it? It's not nighttime. I guess it's dusk based on the sky.
I guess that the sky looks dark. Yeah, right. I was going out at night. It's hard to say, but it's lunchtime. Apparently in New York, it's all dark.
Ben's hanging out in the afternoon though, in the mountains. So you're right. The time of day.
Right. It's really weird. Fun. Yeah. And then, you have the big savage hulking Guardian clone dude, and then the little Jack guy. The door that leads to nowhere. It's like, what is happening? Who got what agenda here? But I do I'm pretty sure I have this issue. The cover seems very familiar to me. I gotta look at my little collection downstairs. But this issue is prime time Clone Saga. It's got all the madness, all the 90s art, everything you would want in a comic of this era is hitting all the tones. So this issue in particular, I'm a huge fan of. I really liked. And you always talk about Web being the run to the litter. For me, I remember when I was buying books, I thought Web was the book. I thought Web is Spider-Man. That was the primetime book versus any of the rest of them. Despite the Begley art being an amazing, pretty consistently. That's my 2 cents on.
If we could have got a page for you, Paul, Adam and I really scratched our heads at the time getting your original comic book page. So we knew we wanted something from the Clone Saga, and definitely Ben Reilly pictured in it, ideally in costume as well. We got him in costume, not full mask, but 122. If we could get access to any of these original pages, I think almost any of them would have been a banger. Love when he's rolling on the rooftop as he drops a guy. That's storytelling. That's Butler not just doing Butler's pretty good at doing the pinups, but he shows some storytelling in here too, which I appreciate.
So this issue is interesting because J.M. DeMatteis actually does the plot, and so Todd DeZago, who was credited as the guest writer in the previous issue, now he's credited as doing the script, and then in the next issue, you have Kavanaugh comes back. So I'm curious what kind of happened there in the meantime. Maybe Kavanaugh was on vacation, who knows? But it's interesting to kind of note a little bit of kind of a stutter in terms of the creative team. Even Butler here is credited more as doing breakdowns as opposed to full pencils. So I'm curious just how much Emberlin had to do. But I mean, I think it's interesting because I feel like at the earlier part of the issue, it feels like it's maybe more heavy pencils, and as you get further on, it feels like maybe it's more Emberlin having to pick up the slack. Like, as much as I like that last page of Spider-Man swinging, it does not feel like it quite has the same level of detail and sharpness that the Scarlet Spider has on that opening splash. So I'm curious about maybe that's where Emberlin had to do a little bit more work in terms of finishing up what the breakdowns actually were showing. But yeah, no, it's a fun issue, as you said. Like, Peter's just rocking around in his apartment with no shirt on, as he does very often. One thing that did stand out to me, and I think has always stood out to me because it doesn't feel like anything they ever really explained, was him and Ben having visions. What? Like, it doesn't really make sense. Like, Ben having flashbacks to his Genesis makes some sense, but the idea that they're feeling something and he's getting like a vision of his clone doesn't make any sense at all. We kind of go with it because it's comics, but like when you read it again, you're like, well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But there is a lot of good stuff that I do like. Like, you have Lieutenant Raven showing up, and he's kind of picking around, and he's talking with Jonah. Jonah's not talking about what it's about. He's there, and he's wondering what's going on with Peter, but Peter doesn't obviously know who Raven is. So there's a lot of interesting subplots that are being seeded, which eventually do mean something, and we'll start to see them in Mark of Kaine. But yeah, no, this was a good start to the storyline. One thing I thought was an interesting giveaway, but I wonder if people thought it at the time, is that when you have that giant hulking Guardian, and he's got all that scarring on his body, and looks a lot like some of the scarring we see on Kaine, did people immediately put it together, or was that... like, they say that they always kind of knew that Kaine was supposed to be another clone, but I'm just curious at what point fans at the time started to put it together.
Yeah, and he has the long hair, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's another long-haired guy with that veiny kind of pattern and brown chestnut hair, and there's a bunch of clones running around. And you're like, okay, so yeah, I mean, because I wasn't really reading these at the time, I can't put myself in those shoes. I would have liked to have thought that I could maybe piece it together, but yeah, we do. It's an overabundance at this point, right? There's like 6 different clones of Peter in the issues that we're talking about, right? With like Jack and the Guardian and Kaine running around, and the other Peter Parker coming out of the tube, but he's not naked like Gwen was because he was with 2 clothes on for some reason. And you're like, anyway, so there's at least like 6 of them. It's a lot. Why not make everyone a clone? Everyone's a clone.
Exactly. Yeah, I think my only explanation, like only benefit that you give for the weird visions, is just them trying to just plant seeds of doubt of who's who, and that's pretty much the simplicity of that angle of it all, right? So, and as the stories tend to roll on, and as you get more clones involved, the vision stuff tends to kind of fade away.
Oh, for sure.
But then you have the scripting of the Jackal himself, and it's like, I don't know, is it the writer's internal thoughts as they're writing this stuff going, what are we doing, guys? This guy's going, that guy, no, this is really the fat guy. He's like, and he's just, his madness is really them projecting the craziness that is going. And yeah, like, here's Scry. Does Scry ever appear again after Clone Saga? This guy, like, I don't know. I don't remember him, any consequence this guy ever. And it's not like, back in the 80s.
Do you want me to spoil it, Paul?
Maybe later. But, like, as you have, comics or content for the pure purpose of making toys and then having to shoehorn new characters in all the time, I understand that model. This is, where's my Square action figure? No one's, pumping out these characters. Like, you already have Judas and you have all these other guys that almost circle back to it. Like, why do you have another layer of another weird villain with another weird agenda? Like, is it necessary? Why, like, what's the logic behind piling on all these layers and layers and layers in the midst of their own internal confusion of the heroes? It's just very unnecessary.
There's a very clear answer for why they would do that. Because it works for X-Men. Because at the time, X-Men was all about shadowy characters and bringing people in. So the Spider Office was like, we can do that, sure. And actually, it's interesting that you bring up Judas Traveler, because this was the first time that we saw Scryer without Judas Traveler. So the idea that, there's more going on here. He's not just, a Judas Traveler, companion. He's something else. And the fact that Kaine recognizes him. So again, it's all about seeding in things that they may or may not end up doing things with. But, I get it from a storytelling perspective. You're trying to add more menace and a sense of like who these characters are, and just because we don't know these characters have hidden stories and hidden histories. Like, one thing I liked about Power and Responsibility is when you had that one character, I think he was like a Whiplash looking character, and Ben was like, oh, I know this guy, and Peter's like, you know this guy? Like, the idea that, oh, that means Ben had adventures and he had a villain of his own when he was off doing his own thing. So it's all about kind of trying to flesh out the world. In theory is what they're trying to do. In practice, it just feels like there's a lot of shadowy people, and we don't really know who they are.
I feel X-Men do so better, possibly because it lends itself to that, but also they're either doing the tuxedo mask, but it's revanche, right? And so then, oh wow, who's this beautiful new character? Or Adam X and his and you're like, oh, who's this? Like, there's at least a flair for the most part, but I mean, I say Adam X, but it's kind of almost in jest because he's one of those characters who is this, who is this man? And he's a Flash man. But you don't see anything visually interesting about him, and we don't get a Betsy Braddock revanche reveal ever. It's not the era of him. It's kind of boring. But yeah. Hey, so Squire also is giving like Kingdom Hearts style, like a bunch of people in like just black cloaks. Again, very uninteresting visually.
You're not wrong. I mean, he's not exactly very in depth as a design. Like, it's a pasty white guy in a cloak. Like, that's pretty basic. So a question I have about, I guess, $3.99. We have the return of the Jackal, which, I mean, if you're going to bring back the clone, I guess it was only a matter of time till we got the Jackal back. What did you guys think about this, given that now that you have the context of having read the original Clone Saga and having seen what he was kind of all about at the beginning? You guys have read, obviously, more modern interpretations of the Jackal and also read this, but prior to this, you'd never really read the original Clone Saga. Is it harder to reconcile those versions of the Jackal now?
The ones that you said previously in the 70s and then the ones afterwards? Are you talking about Carry On? Like, what do you... Well,
yeah, so we have the original 70s version, but also you guys have read more Jackal stuff that's more modern. I'm thinking more of Paul, because, Spider Island, we had Jackal. Like, Jackal keeps showing up throughout the Marvel Universe.
Is Dean Cole Conspiracy?
No, because that was Ben.
Kinda. Yeah, essentially it was Ben, yeah.
Acting as the Jackal.
Yes.
But in general, like, he has shown up a lot post-Clone Saga over the year. Well, not even a lot, but once the Clone Saga was maybe 13, 14 years old, it felt like the Jackal kept recurring, and he, shows up from time to time. I would say, again, he's so different than his 70s interpretation. I'm just curious what you guys think of that now that you have context for what the original version was.
I'll start because I think Paul will have more to say about this. I don't like this version of the Jackal. I much prefer the 70s version. I'm okay with the Carrion variant, but I don't like this over-the-top, I'm a clown, everybody, but he's not like a funny clown. None of the writers seem to have strong comedic take on him. So if he's not making me laugh, and he's not making any characters in the world laugh, he's just... I'm a crazy... Hey, The Mask was a movie that was popular around this time, and he's a green-faced guy, so I'm going to try to Jim Carrey this. It just feels really hackneyed, and I'm always annoyed when he's, like, quote-unquote, on camera. So that's my take on him. Paul, I don't know, you have probably more experience reading about him in Spider Island and stuff.
Yeah, I will stick to this version. Like, again, super crazy, right? Just, like... trying to throw you off, like, even when they get him into, was it Ravencroft? Mm-hmm. And he's like, it's what he wants to be, and he's pretending to be crazy, but no, that I'm going to be, like, some kind of serious, brilliant scientist, I'm fooling all of you, so, like, and then when he, like, randomly invades that gym when Flash has all his kids in there, and he's launching these random alien cloning being things, what is that? I don't know, it was so, like, weird and bizarre, and again, like, just very haphazard, and like Yeah, I agree with you. I'm done with you. I know you kind of were the reason this whole thing kind of started with your craziness, but you're just he's more of an annoyance than the big bad villain stitching it all together. So like, give me more Kaine, get more Skorez in here. I don't care, but you know, but.
What would that look like? He just stands in the corner of most frames, and that's it?
Well, it's like he replaced Kaine. Kaine was in the shadows, now he's ready to step out and do some stuff. So you shadow guy, hey, who do you got? Skorez. Like,
well,
sure.
What's worse is those panels where it's like, and Kaine watches, but then over here, Skorez watches.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Skorez watches, Kaine watches.
Multiple times. Like, Jesus.
Yeah. So many voyeurs.
And we're watching Skorez watch Kaine watch.
Right? It's the line of shadows, just, further and further away. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and the Jackal is not, Sabretooth. Sabretooth is terrifying and a claw guy, and sometimes he'll make a really dark joke. But Sabretooth is this psychotic, serial killer, and it's my stress will go up when he appears in a comic, and like, oh my gosh, he's watching Gambit, watching Belladonna. I'm like, oh no, I'm bored. If the Jackal's around, he's just not really intelligent. He doesn't seem very intelligent to me. I don't have that kind of sense of a intellectual match, and he's not. I mean, he's somewhat physically imposing, but he mostly just kind of clucks that no one hurts him. Nothing you do hurts me. Look at me, and you're like, okay. And he's not the Hulk. Like, he just doesn't seem to have any really strong story-based either motivations or powers, and he's just there to. And he's quite almost literally a MacGuffin of the story. He's a metatextual MacGuffin. Like, we're trying to make you, the reader, not know what's going on, and he's just going to constantly be here for the purpose of saying, I'm going to lie to you. I'm an unreliable narrator. I'm the personification of an unreliable narrator. And I'm going to say something to you, and it's going to be different than that person. And then I'm going to narrate in my head, and in a narration box, the reader's going to go something else.
Yeah.
So It's
whispering to Ben and whispering to Peter, whispering to Jack, and all these different things, right? And then what it tells, Kafka and Ravencroft, all these different things, right? He's just mess with. So if his job's to mess with you, full marks, right? Because he kills it there. If his job is just to totally stray off the scent and make things wacky, then that's.
But eventually my brain turns off because I don't want to engage as a reader with this anymore.
Yes.
There's nothing you can give me. There's a value to me anymore. Other than I'm.
This doesn't make any sense because everything else is weird. Like, if you were like diabolically doing this crazy plot and you capture them or you do something with them and you plant seeds of doubt, that's cool. But do it in a very tactical way, right? Jump in the gym and throw in demon blobs at people, and I have limbo powers now. I don't know. Like, it's just when it makes no sense and it's so random in some of the crap that you do. That's where you lose me in my interest in this.
And the backhanding Jack every 30 seconds,
constantly, punt here, kick there,
and I'm going to backhand him. Like, your backhands don't seem to hurt him at all. Like, are you that strong? I don't understand. He just kind of bounces back. And then, I know there's like a goofy amount of like, I'm going through the Silver Age Kirby and Lee X-Men right now, and the number of pages where Magneto yells at the Brotherhood, silence! Just like from panel to panel. Sometimes you get a page like 3 different times. He'll tell someone silence. It reminds me of like the corrupt robot elders in that Futurama episode. But like, it's kind of funny and goofy, and it's Silver Age. But it's sometimes Jackal doesn't have the whimsy that you can get from like early Bronze or Silver Age. There's not the fun that you get with the original Jackal. And instead it's just 90s to the max, and I'm like a walking trope. And it's just kind of frustrating. So it's not fun to read him.
No. I mean,
what do you think, Adam?
When you really think about it, a lot of it doesn't make sense with the Jackal. Like, he had the time, the energy, the money to create this facility and like have these plans, and like the original Jackal is none of those things. Like, the original Jackal had a pretty easy arc. He kind of, and he had a bit of a split personality too, and it wasn't until, Gwen kind of pounding on his chest that he was able to kind of wake up and realize, oh, what the hell am I doing? This is crazy. Where this is something else entirely. We don't really get a sense of what his true motives are. It only gets worse when you get the maximum clonage. Like, it's just, and unfortunately that's the Jackal that they keep bringing back, is this crazy, I'm gonna create clones of the world. For what reason? Why? Like, we never really know. So none of it really makes a lot of sense. And so he's not a great Spider villain because he doesn't really have a clear, goal or what is this? But it's something that, you add in more and more clones, the idea that we're trying to second guess, who's the real Peter, which up until this point, we have not thought that at all. We've never thought that Ben might be the real one. So I guess that's, pushing that idea of the story that, wait a minute, maybe there's a reason why Scarlet Spider feels like Spider-Man to us. It's because he's actually the real guy, and the other one is this clone. So that part of the Clone Saga and the overarching importance of Peter starting to doubt that he actually is the real Peter is important to the overall storyline, but in the worst way possible. Again, because it's just such a mess. It's just it's not great writing, as you said. It's not consistent about what he's doing and why. And again, what genetic engineering has he done? Cloning already felt like this giant leap, but at least it felt like they kept it at least simplified. We don't want to think about it too hard, but he cloned these people, okay. But now he's also somehow creating these secret facilities with all these, other clones and clone guards and doing all this sorts of genetic engineering. That's when it starts to go a little too far. Spider-Man works best when it's more grounded, and you have a character who's actively, they're pushing him as much into cartoonish supervillainy as possible. And then you also have characters like Judas Traveler and Squire on the periphery who are, on the face of it, look way above Spider-Man's pay grade.
Yeah, and that really shows as you add clones, right? This is the inability to kind of withhold. Classic horror movie mistake: if you show the monster too frequently or too early. And this is if the clones thing idea concept is that nugget, don't overdo it. But $3.99, Amazing $3.99, to its credit, has fantastic angling arts. Of course, really, really good colors. Who is this colorist? This is Bob Sharon on colors. Nice, great reds. Differentiating the two reds between the two spiders.
Oh, yeah.
With the hues of red that aren't quite the same as those for Peter. And this is outside of Power and Responsibility, where they were forced to team up. And to a degree, I don't know that they're forced to team up here. It's Peter's coming to Ben's rescue. And this is kind of more we're going to be two superheroes together. We're not going to be punching each other's lights out the entire time. Maybe a little bit, but not the entire time. So this is...
They faded away from the I hate you stuff. You're this weird clone dude, and they're starting to build the bond. There's still a few moments where Peter's trying to shoo Ben away, and then obviously we have the turn where Ben is willing to prove to him, no, I'm in this together with you, man. I'm gonna take your place in jail. Jumping ahead, but you see kind of that pure bond. When he reverts back to that, why are you doing this again, Peter? You dumbass! Which way do you want to go here at this point?
He's yelling at him. I like that Ben is Peter, you're not the only Peter here. You're not the only Spider here. You're going too far. You need to calm down. You back away from the edge, but I can kind of be a moral compass here for you. I don't have the same amount of. I don't have the same things to lose. I don't have as much.
Yes.
Wife and kid on the way. Let me kind of be here for you, and that's nice that Peter is not just wailing on him and saying, "Shut up, you're nothing." There's a little bit of personhood being granted to Ben all of a sudden, finally, by Peter going, maybe you're not all bad. Maybe you're not a nothing and a mockery. Maybe there's something to you. And you get to see that later on with Mary Jane, too, which I like. We're going to get to where Mary Jane, that great line that I really like, where she says, how do you feel about being an uncle? She said almost an issue before that, this is a nothing and a nobody. And now she kind of goes maybe you should be welcomed into our family, which is a nice evolving part of the story.
Yeah, that's right. And Ben continues through many of the stories, saying, you guys are all confused. I know who I am. I'm Ben Reilly, right? He's come to terms with who he is now. He's still jealous of what Peter has, but he's not as lost, brooding, but I'm in nothing. That's why going back to those, Ramita pages in Parker Legacy after reading this, I don't want to read the self-loathing anymore. I'm glad he's starting to become his own person, his own character at this stage of the storyline.
And even does the same thing that, in the original Clone Saga, we'll call him the original Peter, even though in my headcanon, Ben is the original Peter. But when there's that data, that information, or who was the real clone, and Peter just decides in himself that I have heroism in my heart, therefore I must be the real Spider-Man. I don't need to see these notes. And then Ben, eventually, of course, we're going to get to that issue where Ben does the same. Here's this disc that poor Jack died in a globule to kind of get to me. As the jackal is being carried away to Ravencroft. And I don't need this disc. I know who I am. And like, life's in the living or whatever. And like, bro, like, put the disc in your pocket and just think about it. Okay, like for later. But these are moments like, yeah,
That's what your ankle pouches are for, man.
that's exactly. Just say. People are listening to you. I don't know if this is true or not. Who don't know the 3.5. Right, what is it? 3.5 inch discs. That's what they were.
3.5 inch.
No funny.
Yeah. But like, yeah, the life isn't living, and like, I know who I am. These are these moments, right, of like internal growth that we're getting from Ben, which is nice to see. Because it almost like from issue to issue, you're not quite sure who you're going to get. Like Kavanaugh might revert to like a really brooding, really self-loathing Ben, and then you go back to DeMatteis, and all of a sudden he's cooler about himself. So that consistency with the editors isn't always on point. And you're right, Paul. It is noticeable. That slog, getting through that slog. There's a reason why across the Spider-Verse, it's not over scene after scene, right, of that funny raw delivery of the 90s, like, I'm nothing, I'm no man, I'm no hero, I crawl in shadows like a rat. Like, that's only funny in short bursts in that regard.
Two quick things. At that first issue of Smoke and Mirrors, when you have Spider-Man resolve he's going to go save Ben Reilly, felt like the first time in a while where Peter felt like Peter again. Like, I'm going to go save someone. Like, he was a good guy, and he's come out the other side, which is nice. This storyline is important because it adds an important element for Spider-Man's clone lore, which is the idea of clone generation. Because up until now, we don't know what that is, and now it's this specter which will kind of hang above them. The idea of, like, if you're a clone, this might be your fate. And so, which adds a lot to everything that Spider-Man ever does with clones after this. It's always with this idea of what happens with clone generation. When Ben dies in Spider-Man 75, it's the clone generation that immediately kind of makes him fall to dust. They're like, well, that's it. That he must have actually been a clone. So it's an important facet of how the Spider-Man books deal with clones, and this storyline is where we first see it.
And it's horrific with Gwenny. Poor Gwen.
Yeah.
They just can't leave her alone. And there's a moment in the Animatrix, in one of the stories, where they have robots being attacked by mobs of humans, saying, we got to destroy them, we got to kill the androids. And there's one scene where an android, kind of coded as a female, says, I'm real, I'm a real human. And the human starts belting the robot in the face with a baseball bat. And so her body starts breaking apart, and her voice box starts to kind of like fragment, and you just kind of hear the more robotic, I'm a human, I'm real. And it's just horrific, that juxtaposition. And it happens here. This is what, years before this, in the final pages of, which Spider-Man issue is this? Spider-Man 56, she sees herself degenerating. What's happening to me? She may or may not have heard about this being a thing. Peter yells out, she's degenerating, like the other one. And as she slurps into a pool of, like, carbon molecules, Peter, I'm really Gwen, like, yelling out. That's, like, so horrific from just, like, the psychology of it. I'm a real boy, cries Pinocchio, as he sees his wooden hands burst into flames. Like, that's like an ontological horror. Like, I'm so convinced that I'm a real boy. I'm really Nathan. And what would happen if all of a sudden, right, my whole world just falls away? Like, no, you're a clone or whatever, or a robot. Just very unsettling. So, poor Gwen.
Poor Gwen. She can't catch a break.
No.
Well, she does. It's usually her neck.
Oh, shoot.
Oh.
Adam Chapman.
Sorry.
It's too soon. 50 years, it's too soon.
Dark. I'm going to flip back to the lunch scene really quick just to get a happier visual back in my life after that character comment.
Yeah. Well, they keep bringing her back, like, naked and then giving her the same dress, which is also, like, a weird choice.
Mm-hmm.
What was the bigger naked reveal? The blob of goop on Jackal's crotch, or the smoke lines covering Gwen out of the pot there?
So they have the, like, they get the smoke lines on Jackal, who comes out of the tube, as naked as the day he was born. I suppose that's that day. And Gwenny, and again, the Peter clone that comes. Sorry, spoilers. The other Peter clone, a special casket just for jeans and like a nice shirt. I want some consistency. If you're going to give me wisps of smoke promising to hide precious body parts, why can't Peter get in on the fun? Why can't he be treated equally?
You're a good point, though, Paul. Yeah, like, you know, I guess it's because Jackal's in this crazy nutrient bath that he's got that weird goop just the right place, whereas Gwen gets the very artful smoke. I mean, when your wife gets out of the shower, is that not what it looks like?
The mist comes out really hot. Yeah,
I do love the wisps of smoke. I mean, and then Jackal gets the same. He'll let her get wisps, but that's the same thing that has saved.
No, wait, it's goop and the glob on the crotch, but down like the kneecap, man. It's like, woo.
I mean, the next page, like when you turn it over and he starts walking across the room.
Oh yes, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, these same kind of wisps have saved Wolverine many a time when he's kind of either patches of snow or he's come out of showers as well.
It's a very comic book thing because no other medium has this in the same way. Like they always have, because they have to use shadows in a different way. But in comics, because everything's technically stagnant, it's not actually moving. It's your mind that's having things move, so they can actually kind of cover things with just smoke. Whereas this wouldn't work in a movie.
Yeah, it's the fig leaf effect, right? Of Adam and Eve leaving, and they just kind of put a fig leaf over them. But you could just be creative with what the fig leaf is.
I'm going to skip a little bit over the next kind of thing that's technically in our collections, which is Spider-Man the Clone Journal, only because we've just read everything that's here except for the framing sequence. I never bought this when I was younger. It's pretty chock-a-block. Like, if you missed the last, few storylines, don't listen to us, just read that one issue. Like, it's got so much going on in there, really kind of covering everything and very in quick succession. It's kind of crazy how much they pack into, one shot that just to get you caught up.
And the artist here,
I could read it all within like the new text they added for the issue, like all the original text from from where they pulled all the different content from. You can ignore all of it. You can just read the high level, sub bars, and you're good.
Yeah.
So I breezed through this. It was great.
And I can't see in my volume. I don't know if I just missed it or not. But I'm just looking this up now on Marvel. Just the artist of the issue, the one who's doing.
I don't think they listed
artist, right?
No, but there's a framing sequence by someone that looks very unfamiliar.
Yeah, like they just lists on Marvel.com. It lists the artists that we know: Mark Bagley and Sal Buscema and Stephen Butler and Tom Lyle.
Like the cover's pretty rough, and then there's like the first page when Ben's swinging, and it looks like web exploded everywhere. Like,
it's definitely someone aping or giving kind of a nod to McFarlane, right? Like especially that foot. And the rendering on the foot, and I don't dislike it. It's kind of, I know it's maybe a hacky McFarlane, but I kind of dig it. Like, so I kind of just wanted to give credit where credit is due to the artist, but it's not easy to find. Okay, I'll keep looking.
Yeah, you're right though. Yeah, there's no real credits anywhere in that book.
Weird. I thought it was legally, like you legally had to.
I guess I don't know. I guess not. So,
on the cover,
yeah,
it says black.
Yeah, it says black, and then there's a little scribble underneath. So I don't know. It's a mystery to be solved by another podcast.
Yeah, I'm assuming that artist on the cover did a couple of splash pages at the beginning and the end here, because everything else is content that from previous books.
Like it looks like a W scribbled under black, but of the pencilers listed here on Marvel.com, none of them have the last name of the W.
So it would appear that the pencils on the cover are by Bill Black, and the inks are by Bob Wyachek.
Oh, okay. And is it the same thing for the interior that looks similar?
It looks like the framing sequence is by Robert E. Brown with inks by Don Hudson. I don't know them at all.
Wow.
Okay. So all guys with colors is last names. You got Mr. Black, Mr. Brown.
Right?
And, there you go.
It's an interesting experience to kind of see everything condensed like this. The next, couple issues, we have Spectacular Spider-Man 222, so we see the man in the pod, because, we need another Spider-Man, just in case we're not sure about who we're actually reading about. Now, I don't love... I mean, I've said this to Nate many times.
Say it again. Every episode of the podcast is someone's first podcast, Adam, so they need to know.
So, I am not a fan of Bill Sienkiewicz and his inks over Sal Buscema. This is not new. I will tell this every time. Nate's making fun of me right now. Now, there are moments...
I'm just doing I'm doing a mock surprise.
There are some moments here which aren't bad, but by and large, I think there's just way too much inking. There's a weird shot. I think it's like, I don't know, when MJ's talking to, I guess, a doctor, and on the bottom of the page, like, there's some of the weirdest boob shots of MJ I've ever seen. Like, it's hard to explain. It's just very weird choices. The inks are too heavy. I think the only thing I like about the inks is that there's one shot when Peter Parker is talking to Robbie Robertson, and it's like, I guess, late night at the Bugle, and there's these weird color effects on the, that's Nate's got it
The lamp?
on the lamp.
Yeah.
That was the only thing I was like, I like that. That's an interesting, moody aesthetic that really worked to kind of show.
I love in that same page that I'm going to add on to you, Adam, the establishing shot of the building. Also, really cool, moody, noir. When that works together, when Buscema and Sienkiewicz work together that way, I really, really dig it. And I feel there's a number of panels in here that work really well. They don't all do, but and the coloring, who's coloring this one? John Callis.
John Calise.
Calise?
Yeah.
The oranges, the combination of oranges and blues, orange highlights throughout, I really, really dig. And then the reveal page of the Spider-Man, the Peter Parker with that little naffed up face, almost at first is like, again, very dark and brooding, and you're like, well, he's poorly lit. But it almost makes you ask the question, like, oh, is this a futzed clone? Is this a kind of a poorly put together clone that's not going to pass the muster? Is this kind of we don't know, but I like the kind of eeriness of some of these panels in terms of that mood. I also really love the cover. I'm a huge fan. I love the coloring on this cover.
The cover's nice.
It feels like an overpower card with these particular type of like computer colors. I really dig this cover.
So this is, kind of a split issue because you have Spider-Man fighting Kaine, you have this new Spider Stranger, hitchhiking, and you have Scarlet Spider against, the Jackal. And then in the next issue, we have Web of Spider-Man 123. For whatever reason, I think I had a family friend who gave me like 3 copies of this, one of which is now Paul's. Because when we gave him the original art, he needed the issue to kind of put with the art. I am thinking of the right issue. This is the issue that you have the page of, right? Or no?
No, it's the next one, like 124.
Oh, okay. I think, did we almost buy a page from 123 then, Nate?
Possibly. I'm trying to look and see what that might have been. To your story about having 3 issues of this, why don't we do that? Why don't you have one and I get one and Paul gets one? Why wouldn't that happen? What's going on? Oh, maybe your son has one of them.
I don't know if I still have them now, but at one point I had 3 copies of those. Kavanaugh comes back on the scripting and writing. Butler is, I really enjoy Butler on art. He's such a nice counterpoint to Bagley because they're similar but different enough that they do bring a different energy. But it's interesting to go from, and this is where, now that we have the books kind of coalescing together, when you have Buscema with those heavy inks, and then you go into this, tonally, they're not really working on the same wavelength. They're not similar enough. They're very different in styles. It's kind of like going from, it's not as severe, it's more severe than this example, but when you had the Superman books in the 90s, you had John Bogdanove, which was a lot looser in style, and then going over to like a Dan Jurgens, who had a very tight, very beautiful line. So here it's, again, these very different styles that don't really mesh together when you have a storyline going from one book to the other.
Yeah, I agree. I struggle with the spectacular issues. Like, I'm not saying it's bad, but it just feels a little bit out of place, and it's like that grit and that look would work for certain storylines. Give me some Moon Knight, give me some Blade, give me some any Marvel Knight shit would fit right in that. Daredevil even. But, in the context of... And maybe that particular issue maybe kind of works. You have this, the mystery guy out of the destroyed building in the pod. And everything's happening at night. Or maybe lunchtime, who knows.
This is probably the best issue for any of that. Like, in terms of that combination.
Yeah, right? But otherwise, when it's spectacular, issue tends to roll away. I'm like, I gotta deal with, the dark scribbles of, what's coming. So I don't look forward to those issues when I see them in the pipeline, so to speak.
It's interesting, Butler, too, because, like, on the last issue in 122, he was credited, right, as breakdowns. and I felt it looked really tight. And again, maybe that just means the inker was doing a lot of legwork. But this one, he's credited as penciler, and the cover extremely tight, really nice cover. I love the work on the hand, like the gloved hand from Ben. Hands are super hard to draw. Some artists might think feet are harder to draw. I felt, but this is very tight for the pencils there. And then as the issue goes on, it's just not as cohesive, comprehensive, or as well rendered as issue 122. And as Butler's kind of issues go on, it's almost like you can get a feeling like he needs some catch-up time. And it's interesting to see that. Like, it's almost like you can kind of track that he was getting a little bit behind or having to rush some things. Because, I mean, even just this issue, the cover to the first page doesn't quite feel as tight. So that's kind of sad to see, because I really like him when he's at his best.
But
overall, I don't like this issue. It's way too chaotic. Nothing makes sense. You know, the weird aliens again with Flash. I love the very last few pages. I feel like kind of the shadow, maximum spider that Kaine does to Peter on the rooftop. It's pretty cool.
We're gonna pick up on it,
right?
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. And I think there's another splash page. I think Ben does it. Someone else goes full maximum spider. I do like the final page here. Of Ben swinging out there. I do like that to kind of pin up the page at the very end. But otherwise, this issue was kind of okay, I'm ready for the next one, because it was really and this last shot of the real Peter Parker, let's call him, kind of screaming in the alley. It's very disproportionate, very sloppy, very rushed. So yeah, you can clearly see that this particular issue is kind of let's throw it together. And I think it's a poor issue more for the storytelling than the art, to be honest. But this was one that was kind of okay, we got to tap a few loose things. We got to get May to be kind of awake now, so we can kind of get prepped for 400. Let's move Jackal to a different piece on the board. So we got to move him into Ravencroft. Let's get Jack off the board and make him a pile of pus. It was just we gotta check some things off the list here, and boom, 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 right? And none of it made a lot of sense.
No, I don't disagree with you. In our collections, there's a number of pages that we're going to skip, which is the Planet of the Symbiotes, because chronologically it does take place later. I don't know why they put it here, because you have Peter, MJ, and Ben all in one apartment together hanging out, but they haven't met yet. Ben hasn't met MJ yet, so it's very out of place. So we're going to skip those issues.
What about the shower scene, Adam? We want to talk about the shower scene?
We'll get there. Don't worry when it's time. It's such a weird... The whole thing is so bizarre. I think that's still a month or two.
Flipping through it, I'm going, I don't want to go back to this. Can we skip it entirely?
I mean, there's a Ben Reilly flip book. Again, that's one thing I don't like about how they've presented this, is that they broke it up based on when it should have taken place, one. And two, it was super special, so you had a flip book where one half was this Planet of the Symbiote story, and the other was a story about Ben Reilly in a solo adventure with a new version of the Lizard, which I like a lot more than this. But that'll be something we do in our future at this point. Next up is Amazing Spider-Man 400, The Gift. Now, there's two backups. Actually, there might have been one more. There's two backups to this story. Now, they're broken up in our collections in terms of how they're put. I hope that in the epics, they'll keep them together. Those storylines are The Morning After, which is actually the end of the complete Clone Saga Epic 3. It's a quick little J.M. DeMatteis plot with the Stanley script on tongue Grimmett pencils. It's a quick little story at the end. And then there's also... what is it called? The Parker Legacy? I can't remember what it's called now. Which is otherwise known as part of Lost Years number 0, which is in the complete Clone Saga Epics Volume 1, which bothers me. It comes right after the kind of birth of a clone story that was the flip book to Power and Responsibility. And it kind of has what happens after he watches Peter nailing MJ. Just embracing MJ, in the window, and then decides he's a clone and has to leave. So those are two backups that were in Amazing Spider-Man 400, but they've been kind of separated from the main issue in this particular collection. I always love 400. I'm pretty sure if I go back and listen to our top 5 Spider-Man stories, I'm sure I probably mentioned this particular one. Again, I've already kind of said it, but it's nice and simple for the most part, even though you have a lot of other complex things going on. I do like the image of Spider-Man and Scarlet Spider just hanging out in Peter Parker's backyard. No one notices. No one's worried about it. Whatever.
Yeah, why is this happening in costume? Why?
Yeah, Peter leaves the house when Ben comes to get him and just like puts his undies on. Like, why? Yeah. It's is it not worse for Spider-Man and Ben and Scarlet Spider to be in the backyard than Peter Parker at his own aunt's house to be talking to some guy who's like, hey, I take pictures of Spider-Man for a living. This is the clone guy. We're having a meeting. And you take pictures like it's easier to play off.
Yeah, really weird. And at the end of that conversation, he's like, I promise you'll never hear from me again. Until that man dies, I'll be right back. Don't worry.
He's really broken. Yeah, I'm just going down the
okay. That's the truth. But other than we can tease and nitpick a few things, but other than that, no. This again, very reading through this. I love the moment on the Empire State Building, up there with May, and the realization that she knew the whole time. The kind of the embrace with the sun splash behind them, I thought was really really great. And then like from that point on, the issue just really those last few really hit home. So very impressed with how that rolled out, and then they ruined it for me with the police taking Peter away.
When they're at the funeral, it's interesting, and I'd have to go back to have a sense of exactly on what good terms they were at this point. But Felicia's there, and that's a big deal because only 3 or 4, maybe 5 years earlier, for a while, she was dating him, Flash Thompson, as to get back at Peter, and was playing mind games. She was kind of a different character when Michelani was writing her. And then when we see Maximum Carnage, she's kind of written differently, but she's not really interacting with MJ at all. But obviously they're on good enough terms that she's going to show up to Aunt May's funeral. Now, her relationship with MJ does take a step forward in the Clone Saga. I kind of miss them having that kind of camaraderie, although in the modern comics they actually get along together really well, but they're also both superheroes, so who knows what's going on there. But I like that we start to see the beginnings of that here, and again, I like the inclusion of her being at the funeral.
Some of my favorite parts of this issue, I like that DeMatteis really gets into the philosophy of clones a bit more. Up until this point, it's really dismissive. I think in an actual thought experiment, if we were to consider what the value of the life would be of a human clone, especially, and we really value sentience and consciousness and memories, if they have a duplicate memory set, that this idea that you're a nothing, they're so hasty to do that, and even MJ is guilty of that in this issue to some extent. So I like that DeMatteis is doing a lot here with memory, and what is memory, and in the pages where Ben is in the rain, drawn brilliantly by Bagley on the rooftop. There's these lines that says I remember. He thinks no, Peter's. I just remember the memory, but real memory or implanted one. He can't change the fact that he loves her. So this idea that beyond the memory, beyond these kind of playbacks in our minds, these emotional recordings, he's still convinced that he loves Aunt May, that he loves May, and is that not real? Can anyone tell you don't love someone? Is that up to anyone else other than the person feeling that love? And so it's keeping him here. It's tearing him apart. And there's a line before that in the previous page about you're not her nephew. You don't belong here. Go away before you make things worse. So he's constantly being told by people of what he is and who he loves. And I like that they deal with this issue as well. Mary Jane says something similar too. Again, to Peter about how Ben's nothing. So after that conversation, we're hey, we're on the lawn, we're doing cosplay here, you never see from me. Again, we get, where's that conversation? Okay, so then Mary Jane is talking with Aunt May, and she starts with, do you remember? So she kind of goes into memory again about do you remember how when you first met Peter, and how we kind of tried to get you together, and Aunt Anna was we were just, and so they're talking about their memories, and Mary Jane gets to sit with May and then reminisce about memories. And then Peter comes in and gets to reminisce with Mary Jane about memories. They're watching these old reels. And then even Peter starts saying things like, what do you think that memories are? Don't memories make us? Isn't this weird? He says, amazing, isn't it, to just sit here on the couch and look at the past like this? Funny thing is, I hardly remember any of this. If it wasn't for these old movies, home movies, I'd never know most of this had happened. So this, again, the idea that the memory is only being called back because this recording is here. I don't really have memories of this. And yet, that's me. That's me in the recording. And this is supposed to be part of who I am and my makeup and what makes me me. And yet, I'm reflecting on the fact that there are lots of memories. This is true of all of us, too, right? The way our minds work, that we don't have back at an easy recollection. We can't gather them back to us. We can't really say a lot about who we were when we were 7 years old. Mm-hmm. And so he's having this moment of realization and thought about, like, oh, if memories are what make us, and I don't even have access to all of my memories. And Ben has very vivid memories of who he is and his relationship to May and his relationship to people. And he starts questioning this. It's like, think about it. If someone took away our memories, our past, would that make us any less who we are? And if someone else had those memories, even if they weren't really their own, wouldn't that person still be us in some way? So he's getting to this great philosophy. Mary Jane cuts him off, and she's like, no, he's nothing like you. Talking about Ben, she says, he doesn't have your heart. This is our life, the life is ours. So she's getting very defensive, and she's worried about, like, you know, the implications here. But I like that they're having these conversations because Ben deserves justice. Mm-hmm. Let's give Ben justice. So he can't be in the room. This is so heartbreaking, right? They're in the room together. They get to see her and say goodbye to her. And Ben, who came back to New York for her and has been through quite a bit of hell already, if they see him in the window, they're going to scream at him and say, again, you're ruining everything. So he's hiding out there. Just soap opera, heart-wrenching. He wants to come in. And you know what? May's already told Peter, I know you're Spider-Man. She already knows that things are crazy in his life. I think she could handle meeting Ben, and she was prepared, coming in, being told that this is Peter also and has his memories, and him being terrified that he's going to be rejected. And they could have done a whole other little side story there where she puts her hand out and says, nice to meet you, Ben. You know, like, or I already recognize you. I feel like I've known you a long time, and could have, right? I feel like if she had been allowed to make that decision, because they don't, they hide the truth from her. They keep insisting she can't take it, she can't handle it. And so then you cut to that incredible page by Bagley, right? Of Ben, I'm going to show you too. Mm-hmm. On the rooftop.
It's crushed.
Just tears, right? I came back and I wasn't allowed to be in the room with her. Mm-hmm. Really, really powerful stuff. So for me, my connecting point is Ben through all these stories. And so I think that DeMatteis does a great job of giving us entertaining some more notions that clones can be people, that Ben can be a person. And this to me is also the beginning point of opening the doors for, hey, this is the real Peter Parker. You get to love Ben Reilly. At this time in the planning sessions for the editors, they were really planning on making the swap. Right? This is for me where you really start to empathize with him and kind of wish and yearn for more for him. And this will play out later, right? Once he dons the Spider-Man costume, he becomes the next Spider-Man. That you go, yeah, like this is a real person, and he deserves more. So that's mostly what I get out of this issue that I enjoy.
One thing I want to mention in that page where Peter is being arrested and kind of being put into the car, when he looks up and he sees Scarlet Spider on the roof, I like that moment because he's like, is it his fault? Like, he doesn't know. He has no context. He just lost his aunt. He's been put into a police car. His world is falling apart. He's just lost, one of the most important people in his life. He's trying to grapple with this. He's been put into this police car. He doesn't know what to do. He looks up and he sees his clone, and he's like, just the look in his face is like, I love that there's so much ambiguity in that facial, in that face that Bagley gives us.
No, it's easy. Bro, you promised. And here you are.
Right, exactly. You said you wouldn't be there, and you're clearly here, and now I'm in a cruiser. So it does, I wish they followed that up more. I wish that was like a storyline. That's high drama, like, soap opera. Because, and the way that Bagley draws Ben looking down, that low angle shot, he's looking down on him, he's almost flexing, and then the panel just underneath the Ben shot is of Peter looking back through the back window of the car, kind of like that bewildered, I can't stop looking at you. Like the storytelling here from Bagley really does say to me, oh my gosh, it's you want my life, I knew you wanted my life, and now you just take it? Like, that is so good and so promising, and I wish they really went with it.
I do like MJ afterwards because it's nice, remembering that Spider-Man's part of a big continuity, and it's like, who should I call? Matt Murdock? No, Murdock's dead. Yeah, like everyone thinks he's dead at this point. What's his partner? Oh God, what's his name? Maybe I should call Robbie. Like, I like the little character moments there because she's obviously flummoxed. What are you supposed to do when your husband just gets put into a police car out of nowhere? And then, I guess really the money shot, turning around and seeing Scarlet Spider standing there and him pulling off that mask, which is such a great shot of him just pulling that mask over his face. And it's just that look, it's time we met face to face and seeing Peter's face in front of her. It's fantastic.
So lucky that Bagley was able to do this issue, that they had him and that he was the one and there wasn't some kind of emergency. Really, really fortunate that he's on deck.
But then you have the next shot in the next issue. Suddenly, I love John Romita Jr. on Spider-Man. I think he's better as a Spider-Man artist than on anything else. But I was just like, wow, what a different style of tone. Like, it's so different. Suddenly, you have Spider-Man almost having like a mullet, this thicker
full mullet chops. Yeah.
That's right, Scarlet Spider.
I'm here for it. I don't care. I love it.
Like,
and she gives them the smack again. High soap opera, right?
Dude,
like you are almost like Maddie Pryor. Maddie would have punched with a closed fist, but still great stuff.
Honestly, it's nice. It's nice for me. I like having JR come back. Like he's this interesting. I miss Tom Lyle. Obviously, Tom Lyle was really important to the early Clone Saga for me, visually speaking. But there's just something about John Romita on Spider-Man, which to me, because when I started reading Spider-Man, he was one of the main Spider-Man artists, feels very like a 90s gritty Spider-Man. Like, not too gritty, but just gritty enough. And a lot of the extra line work, and I think it fits here better than in most places.
Well, clearly the first page there with the slap, like, Ben's face is like, oh, no, you didn't. But, it's nice, clean, yeah, right? That face.
That's a great image. That's a great shot, though.
Yeah. But
I love the shinging.
Yeah, it's nice, clean, like when you take your time, JR, and then it quickly goes to sausage fingers and his typicalness, like for the next few panels over. But when JR takes it's fine, but it's amazing how both Ben and Peter suddenly grow full mullets between from the prior issue. Is actually quite.
It's their spider power. They can do it. Men can do it too.
Yeah, just like Storm can magically just change costumes with her powers, right? Ben can grow hair. I couldn't stop laughing when
I love the art in this issue, though. Yeah. This is great. And again, there's so much rain. So much rain. Because
so much rain.
JR's books are the wettest books you'll ever read.
Cycle of Life.
Pardon me?
Adam, are we skipping over really quick the Cycle of Life story between the end of 400 and this?
Yeah, I don't like it. Well, we can talk about it. I don't love it.
No, I hate it too. I just thought the whole, like, we're leaving this cemetery, these random goons just sold this yellow freaking Cadillac roll-in. Like, Peter's walking and talking, punches the one guy right in the keister, crushes the gun, and they just keep walking like nothing ever happened. Like, why have these goons in this story? Like, you could have had this nice seminal conversation with Peter and MJ. You did not need these two hooligans for any reason in any of these panels, because as even this little story continues, it follows the same vein of, being raised by Aunt May and having a wonderful memory of her and all that kind of stuff. Like, it just seems so bizarre to have this random mugging take place post-funeral.
True.
It's a little different, of course, now that Stan has passed, right? When the line, like, and when we die, it's nothing more than our long-awaited graduation day, right? Getting to a little bit of the philosophy of Stan Lee getting peppered in here, and she's trying to comfort Peter, and then you're, like, reading this now in a post-Stan Lee world, and you're like, oh, R.I.P. But yeah, everything you said is correct.
I guess, now that we're talking about JR as well, we're going to skip that Derek Robinson story with Stan Lee, but now that we're talking about JR, I mean, okay, we should go back and talk about the Parker legacy, because again, it technically comes out as we're getting reintroduced to him as being a regular Spider-Man artist, and like everything that you see in the Parker legacy, it's no surprise we got Lost Years, because this is the Lost Years, and they call it Lost Year Zero when they later publish it this way, but I mean, it is a great kind of lead up, and kind of showing how Ben leaves New York, starts to, figure out who he's going to be. It's dark as fuck, though. Like, it's it's not, it's not a fun, happy story. This is a guy who has lost all sense of identity. He's really depressed about it. He's not super nice to people around him at first. He jumps into action when he has to, but he's not a super nice guy. When he gets drunk and is super like a dick to that guy, which is hard to read. And telling the guy, like, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just disappear? It's brutal, and it's violent, and you feel how lost Ben is at this moment. But then we do get to see him be heroic, or at least try to take back what he's done, save the guy's life, say that he was wrong, and start to get the idea that he's going to move on with his life, and hopefully figure out who he's going to be. We get to see how he chooses the name, so it ends up on a more uplifting, optimistic note. But it's dark. And JR makes it dark, partially. And the coloring choice for the part where he's drunk, it's really a weird, sickly red. It's a fascinating coloring choice that, we're going to have Ben Reilly drunk and angry and screaming at this guy. So we're going to go with a very different color palette than we have anywhere else in that story. It's only for those 3 pages when he's drunk. So I'm only going to guess here that they're saying that when you're drunk, everything around you is red and you're angry. Right, Paul?
Absolutely.
Okay. So next time I'm drunk, just make sure you tell me, Adam, you're red right now. Everything's red around you. You're angry.
Right? I think you're Ross, right, Adam.
There you go.
All makes sense now.
But anyways, I like the art in the story. Again, it's at times hard to read because we want to see the happiness in Ben, and as you said, we've started to turn a corner with Ben, and finally things are happier for him, and yet we get this story that's all about him in his darkest days, which is hard to read. But again, without this, we don't get Lost Years, which is a fantastic series. So for that alone, I'm thankful that we got this story.
The art is. I like J.R. Jr. a lot. I love this art. I like the grit, extreme grits, even if it's overwrought. Yeah, in the way that it tells the story or the narrative. But the brickwork, right? The settings. He's really good at establishing place, and so I enjoy it for that reason. And I guess sometimes you can just love comics because you like the art more, and that's my case here. Especially with all the glass breaking and water pouring down. He's just great at doing that.
Let's move on to Aftershocks Part 2, I guess, which is Spectacular Spider-Man 223, which, again, has a lot more of what we were talking about before about, the Jackal's so crazy, and he's in Ravencroft, and he's, trying to get what he wants, but it's got a mysterious agenda, and we're not really going to get to know what that is, and it's just, it's a lot. And so we have this overwrought storytelling at the same time as this overwrought art, so it is kind of a mess. It's funny because this is Tom DeFalco writing it, and if you put a gun to my head and said, tell me who wrote this, I would never have guessed Tom DeFalco. It does not feel like a Tom DeFalco script. The pacing doesn't feel like Tom DeFalco. Nothing about this feels like a Tom book. So I'm just kind of shocked that it is.
I don't know that I have much to add to that. I would say if I didn't read who the author was, I would also not have felt Tom at all.
I do like, I guess the only, not redeeming thing, but I mean, it's a very soap operatic comic, overblown storytelling, as we do get that, I am Parker, Peter Parker, moment, which is, very overwrought, but kind of needed to be there. This
is where the inks, though, work. There are times when it can work quite well, right? So
the face almost doesn't even look like a face. It almost looks like a misshapen skull, poking through the skin. It's really haunting. But again, considering the character that it is, and that he's not a real boy. It's just freak face, for lack of a better term, until he later gets a proper name, Spider-Side. He is what it is. I do like this idea of you're building up the impending doom because you have, Kaine watching over Peter, and he's like, something tells me she's in danger, great danger. So I do like that idea. We've heard it already. We've seen various different times Kaine saying that something's coming. He's getting this vision. So now we feel like it's actually coming. The only thing I don't like about that last page is that it feels really weird that we have the 3 panels at top, and then we have the one panel on the left-hand side, and then just a lot of white. And it just
all this empty space.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel right, but whatevs. And that leads us to the last storyline, I guess, that we'll talk about, which is the Mark of Kaine, which doesn't really answer many questions or any questions about Kaine, does it?
Part 1 of 5. It's 5
It's a haul.
parts that give you almost no answers.
Now, I will say from an image perspective, Butler does a great job in that first shot of Peter just with the spider background behind him, which is very classic looking, with Peter all in his prison garb. He's all cuffed up. I do like that initial shot. And also, actually, I should say I like the cover. Very classic, where you have Kaine is kind of shoving his own name up there. It's the Web of Kaine.
Okay.
Get rid of Spider-Man. I like that. Even you have the little Scarlet Spider logo being shoved off the page. You have like the numbering kind of. I like it when comics play with the cover concept, and so we have
corner box.
Yeah, so we have.
Oh, yes, it's your jam. Like this is as far as pages go. Even if you didn't like, and Butler does a good job here, but even if you didn't like the actual renderings of the characters, I think this would make you happy.
Oh, for sure. This is the closest I think Kaine ever gets to having like a logo, which is really just.
Oh, yeah. Oh wow, that's the Kaine fonts. I would never have been. And it highlights the impossibility of that face mask. Whatever that mask or cowl is, the plastic trash bag,
Plastic trash
over his face, and now he's a gaping maw screaming. That bag won't burst, or I guess it just fully stretches, but encapsulating perfectly, like still showing us the rendering of his lips. It's the impossibility of comics again there, right? Like no fab could operate that way in real life, so it's fun. I guess I like it. It's silly, but he's a Frankenstein guy. Like he's got this kind of like gothic, almost 90s edgy look, and it's all impossible, but I'm here for it.
An undercooked storyline, like he's around, but it doesn't really get to do a lot. Is Lieutenant Raven. So I do like in the previous storyline where you have Kaine like grabs him and is like, you've got the wrong guy. Here's your evidence. So he scars him with the Mark of Kaine, which is obviously a big moment for Raven. So he starts to realize that they've got the wrong guy. I would have appreciated that more if we had seen more of Raven. Like we'd seen him kind of showing up here and there talking to people, but it felt like we never really got enough of him to feel enough of a connection as to like what his personal stake was. We got a bit of a sense, and obviously that'll be expanded when we see Lost Years. But they've kind of paid lip service to it, but that was about it. But I do like, he gets this hideous scar, and now he knows, and everyone else thinks that they've got the right guy. They have all this evidence against Peter, and he's like, nope, we got the wrong guy. I need to fix this. I do like putting that character in that spot. I do think it's interesting to give Spider-Man an unlikely ally like that, someone who staunchly believes in him no matter what, because he's got the scar on his face. He now knows, who's the real culprit. So I do like that idea. I just wish we got to see more of Raven.
And he's like, thank you. You really blown the lid off this case. I'm horrifically scarred now for the rest of my life. You couldn't just give me a picture or something, or scar my hand or whatever did happen to my face. And Kane's like, Kaine only does the Mark of Kaine to faces. And you're like, okay, Kaine, whatever.
Right?
So at least to snap his neck. That's usually his current MO prior.
Yeah, he does love a good neck snap. Yeah. But also the idea.
But it's the Mark of Kaine. That's the whole storyline. Mark of Kaine.
Also the idea that there can be no one else out there that can do scars. That's also it's clearly him. It's clearly this is who it was. And you're like, well, could there be more than one person? This is the Marvel universe. You got the Melter, you got the Shocker, you got Electro. There's a long list of people, Human Torch, that can scar your face up. So
maybe not like this. I mean, maybe it looks like someone just peeled part of your face off with his bare fingers.
Right, because he had the special scar testing machine that prefer scar from before this scar.
So,
but it's a fun book kind of storytelling device. You're like, okay, I have a realization.
So I realized now that I think about it. So I had 3 copies originally of Web of Spider-Man 123. I had 2 of 124 from the same guy.
Wow.
And that is the copy that I gave to Paul.
So this is a guy who just stole whole kind of
No, I don't know how he got them. He worked at a Shoppers Drug Mart. He was a family friend. I think he read them, but I don't know how he ended up with multiples. Anyways, then he was like, I don't really care about these anymore. You can have them. I'm like, all right, this is awesome. And so I looked at Web of Kaine 124, and I was like, someday I'll give this to my brother-in-law.
How could you not love this beautiful splash page? Ben, masked, demasked, looking around. Love it.
Now, this is an interesting one because now I think this is the first time MJ meets Seward Trainer, right? So, like, Seward Trainer up until this time, we've seen him once or twice with Ben, and so now he's going to take a bigger role. Eventually when we find out who, quote unquote, who is the real Spider-Man, he plays a big part of that as well. So this is important. He's trying to figure out what's going on with Mary Jane's baby, which is the shot here that we gave to Paul of him looking at something on a computer screen.
Yep. The costume for Trainer, almost like same kind of. It feels like an '80s toy line.
Oh yeah,
it feels like not Centurion, but something else. Maybe Mask. Maybe it's kind of like he belongs in Mask or something.
Well, he also looks like an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. or something.
He's Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah. He also could just be the S.H.I.E.L.D. Stuff. But and Mary Jane's just sitting there in really kind of trendy clothes, getting a scan of her baby to make sure there's not a radioactive. We haven't really talked about this, have we? Like, she's worried about the radioactive blood, radioactive spider blood that Peter. Spider blood. There it is.
Active spider blood.
That might be in her child now from Peter, which is a cool, again, other soap opera idea. I'm glad that someone thought about this and that she wants to, look into it. But other than that, there's just a lot of kind of trainers saying things like, "Hey Ben, secrets." Kaine, yeah.
This particular storyline is very fluffy. Like, it's very, like, there's a little bit of character work here and there, but it's a lot of, like, I think I might be Peter Parker and I'm angry about it, and like, I'm worried about my baby. I think MJ's in danger. I'm Kaine. I'm gonna, take care of her. You have Stunner coming back into the picture, like,
And even Jonah talking to Robbie, and Robbie's like, "Hey, I really think we should take care of Peter." But we already know previously that Jake Jonah is spending his money to get him a lawyer. So then
Robbie even says that. Robbie says, like, "I know you're funding his thing, but he's like, you can't do this because he's going to put things in his newspaper has to go against Peter," which is probably correct. He has to. So,
and then he's like, "Whatever, I'm going to do it anyway." Like, okay, bye.
Yeah. We have MJ, gets taken by Kaine, gets rid of Kaine, then runs into this other, the freak face, the eventual freak face version of Spider-Man, and then she's like, "What's going on?" They're confronted by Kaine. Like, it's just a lot of, like, clone A hits clone B, hits clone C, hits real. Like, it's just a lot of, like grab some action figures and just start mashing them together. And it can be at times hard to kind of follow the thread because you're just like, what am I looking at anymore? And, like, we spent a lot of time on, like, 3 pages of Spider-Man escaping from jail that we already knew he could probably do in his sleep. Like, it's that kind of stuff. Like, are we just sucking up page count? We get Traveler back. Yeah. They have to figure out a way that Peter can be in the story, but also people don't realize he's out of jail, so they have to come up with a convoluted reason to do that. So the Traveler has her person make it look like he's there so that he can go, do his own thing. I do love the shot by Bagley in the Amazing Spider-Man issue of MJ holding a gun. Like, I don't know, something about, like, she looks great in that sequence. She's got the gun. Spider-Man comes in there.
Because you love guns, Adam.
I know. And she's like, "I'll shoot you." And he's like, it's me. And it's Freakface. We don't know that immediately. And then, like, she shoots their wedding photo. It's really interesting stuff, but also just, like, over and over and over again. Like, now Kaine shows up. He abducts her into a weird subterranean cavern where the Mole Man hangs out. Like, okay. And then...
Why? And then he, like... he's busy, like, wandering the cavern, and she's kind of like, "Okay, I got the Spider Tracker, and see you later," since you're looking that way. Like,
right?
It's such a bizarre escape. Like,
and, like, Scarlet Spider comes to the house. He finds, someone in Spider-Man's costume, and then the Peter from jail opens up the door, and it's, like, the 3 of them, and you're like, good God. Now we have Tom Lyle come back for an issue, and it's so wet, this issue. So much rain.
Oh, my God.
It's the wettest issue you'll find. Peter comes in. He's just soaking wet. They're fighting each other like these 3 guys. I do love, Peter, to differentiate himself, puts on, like, the black gloves, the black mask, so he looks different. One of my favorite shots is, Peter in the rain. Yeah, Nate and I are just sharing the same image to each other.
Yeah.
Oh, join us.
Like... we're all showing this one picture together. Like, if I have to go out in the rain with a leather jacket, like, I want to look like this. Like, you know, like, it's just such a overwrought, wet image.
With lightning crackling in the background.
It's everywhere.
Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
We all got it? Okay, good.
Okay.
But, like, it's just so... It's so over the top. There's not a lot of actually happening here. It's just... You know, it's almost like MJ is the MacGuffin, and they're constantly looking for the MacGuffin, and it's like, I've got the MacGuffin. No, I've got the MacGuffin. She's not even a person at this point. She's just a thing to be protected and to be bobbled between the various different spider people. And then, you know, there is some good shots here, like the art, like with the, when Freakface is there, and he's like, I said, get away from my wife. Like, that's a pretty badass image, because we're not used to seeing Spider-Man being that angry, and because it's not really Spider-Man, they can do that. And then so they have like all four of these guys fighting each other, and then you have Freakface just completely losing and start to getting all disjointed and his face goes crazy. But you don't realize that at first because Tom Lyle doesn't make him look like a fucking monster. Then you flip the page and you get Spectacular Spider-Man, and you're like, I don't know what this is. Like, I don't know what...
Spectacular Spider-Man.
Like, it's just so over the top. Sal Buscema and Sinkovich, and suddenly it looks like Freakface is like gyrating and pulsating all over the place. None of that was in the Tom Lyle art. Like, it just looked like he was just on the other side and angry. Yes, thank you. Like, that's fine. He looked like the Joker, maybe, but he didn't look like he was having convulsions and going fucking crazy.
It is still very disturbing, though. I like that Lyle puts together here.
Oh, for sure. And then, so in this sensational issue, suddenly Freakface is doing all sorts of weird shit. His body's going everywhere. Now, it doesn't mean everything's bad. You have this fantastic action shot of Scarlet Spider, like, jumping around and getting into shit. And I really like that. Like, the colors and the inks as well by Sinkovich actually work at times on the shadows on Scarlet Spider's costume, especially on the face. So it plays a lot more with the blacks. So it does give him a kind of a scarier image. But yeah, this whole kind of, it's not even the last chapter, right? Like, we think it's the last chapter, but it's not even the last chapter. It
feels like it should be.
This is only part 4. We have the big moment where they decide that, you know, Peter's going to go home with his wife, try to figure things out. Ben's going to go into jail in his place. I do like that moment. I like that they're starting to kind of come together and figure out how they're going to work together in the future. Then we get Spider-Man Unlimited number 9, which is all over the place. You got a story by Tom Lyle.
Way better than that other Unlimited story with the Twin Towers and the gangster cyborgs there.
So,
like, you know,
in the Life of Riley archives, they talk about how Tom Lyle wanted to start writing. They decided that they would give him Unlimited, but then Unlimited became part of this, like, overall arcing story, and that as a writer, he wasn't ready to deal with something like that. And you can kind of feel it, like, this issue is very disconnected from the rest of the Mark of Kaine storyline, but it's still technically part of it, and it's a weird kind of version of the Sinister Six altogether. Ron Lim's art even isn't his best either. It's kind of it's very much an Unlimited story, for the most part self-contained, but then you have a few moments where they pay lip service to what happened in the rest of the storyline. You have what I do like, which is Felicia Hardy, you know, paying a visit to Ben having no idea who she is. Now, I don't think she would actually say, hey, you were Spider-Man, in a prison
right,
where they're probably recording things, but whatever. But I do like that moment and her kind of being very confused about what's going on with Peter, which then kind of leads into the very end of the issue where MJ shows up to talk to Felicia, which I really liked. This is interesting to bring Unlimited out of the quarterly status, which it was at the point. So it was only coming out every 3 months, every 4 months, I guess, every 4th month. And then suddenly it's part of the main narrative, which is an interesting spot for a quarterly book to be.
Yep. Even as when reading this, I was like, this doesn't do anything for me. And even the art, and this is not the greatest, and I love Ron Garney. This is some of the less effective Ron Garney work, or maybe the least effective I've ever seen. Maybe some of the work that he does actually in the Austin run of X-Men, as I recall, isn't some of his best. But yeah, so to have this book, normally in this era, I found I could at least enjoy the art, but I have read this issue multiple times as a teenager, and coming back to it again for rereads, I couldn't remember what this was about. And then I've already read. I went through this volume like a few months ago, and I'm coming back to it again for this show, and I still had a hard time remembering anything that happened here. You're right, Adam. The best, or at least in my mind, the best thing is the Felicia Hardy conversation. That's kind of interesting and intriguing, and like, oh, we haven't seen this before. But other than that, it's just like it's too long. Keeps going. I don't remember anyone else getting any more marks of Kaine in this. Mark, anyone else out?
No, I don't think so.
He dresses as Spider-Man, which is really like hitting the nail on the head there. Like, if you didn't figure out with the Guardian that this guy's a spider clone, now I'm dressing in a spider costume. Tear that mask off. It's the other mask. It's me, Kaine. Cool. Spider-Man. Yeah.
It's interesting when we come back to Spider-Man, not next month, but the month after. Like, we're going to start to feel that the Spider books are less and less connected in some ways, because we're going to get less of the full, like, 3-part, 4-part stories, and more, an issue or two here or there. It's more like 2-part stories. Well, sorry, I should say we get a couple of those. Then we get a mega story, because we get the maximum clonage, which feels like that's where it should end, but it doesn't. It keeps going after that. So I'm very interested to kind of get to that. We actually don't get to Ben being Spider-Man. We're not going to be talking about that for, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 more months. I think not till October by the looks of it. We've got a lot of just clone madness before Ben actually gets to take over.
And this is because they said extended, right? They said kind of go. Like, the book's been selling well, so they kind of just went draw it out.
That's right. Now, what I'm looking forward to, I'm looking at my reading list I sent you guys, is that, like, in August, we're going to be talking about the Lost Years, which is going to be most of the conversation. I'm probably going to say, hey, I know we have 12 other issues to talk about, but we should really talk about Lost Years, because that's some really good stuff. On the next one we do for the Clone Saga in July, we're going to be talking about, that Planet of the Symbiotes. That's a really quick page turner, because it's not great, except for weird excessive shower scenes for no reason. So that'll be interesting for sure. I'm excited to eventually get to Ben, like really Ben as Spider-Man. Like that's
what I want.
So, that's not happening until October, but I'm very excited for October for you, Nate.
Me too. I can read it ahead of time and then read it again, and then maybe there'll be no more issues where I completely forget everything that happened in them, because hopefully there'll be more, some better stories going on there.
We got some weird stuff coming up with Judas Traveler, so that'll be fun for next time. Now, on our actual next Book of the Month Club that we're going to do, as we talked about last time, we're going to be talking about 5 issues of Uncanny X-Men, although I think I might throw in Alpha Flight 1 in there, just to kind of throw it in there, but that is the plan. So we're going to be talking about the premier Canadian superhero team, because that episode will go out like a day or two before Canada Day, so what better way to say Happy Canada Day than talking about Alpha Flight?
There's no better way.
Better believe it. All right, any final thoughts on what we've talked about today?
Final thoughts.
Well, you know what? As much as we can kind of agree that some of the quality is not maybe top shelf, I think it's not like we're trudging through this, having a miserable time going through it. Like it's still a fun romp. It's bizarre. It's crazy. It's cool to look at it from a few different kind of lenses in terms of trying to understand, how we remember enjoying it when we were younger, how now we're more involved, and you've interviewed a bunch of creators, kind of seeing it from their perspective, and all these different kind of things that kind of make the Clone Saga a different beast today than it was at the time is very fascinating. And also, rereading some of the stuff or having experienced it again for the first time, this has been a very fun romp so far. So, give it a shot if you haven't read it. It's a good time.
For me, the Mark of Kaine is quite painful. It is safe.
It hurts. It burns your face when he touches you. Of course it's painful.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of a better way to say hi. The ultimate high five. High five. My face. So for me, it's saved only by virtue of Tom Lyle and the artists that are working there. So a lot of this is mostly the visual storytelling is what I might come back to. The earlier stories work a bit better, but yeah, as this goes on, it feels too much. Not enough substance, but the art is almost always good, so I like that.
It's interesting, Nate, as much as I kind of made fun of it as I kind of summarized what was happening in Mark of Kaine, when I was younger, I loved the Mark of Kaine, only because I like the ridiculousness of, all the different spiders fighting each other. I like that you had, Peter wearing the black costume, parts of the black costume, Spider-Man costume. I always really enjoyed that. I love the visual, so, I can make fun of it now because it is kind of, a high-calorie, low substance kind of story because it's just a lot of smashing into each other. But when you're a certain age, I think it probably works a lot better. It's a lot more fun. You read it now, it feels like a little bit more like you're trudging through it, just kind of waiting for the next major thing because we get issues after issue of Peter's in jail. What are they going to do? But they're not really moving that plot line along. And once they realize that, they're like, well, let's get Peter out of jail. But we need him to still be in jail, so now Ben's in jail. Which for fans of Ben might be hard to take as well, because now he takes a back seat. Peter is kind of a just driving seat for the next month or two of stories because Ben can't really be the lead Spider. He's now in jail. So now we get Peter kind of taking the center stage. Now I will say coming up, we got issues I really like because we have Web of Spider-Man 125. You have a like a hologram on the cover. You got Scarlet Spider and Gwen on the cover, although it's Peter as Scarlet Spider. We have the first appearance of the Phil Green Goblin. So we have some big stuff coming up, but it's not Ben's stuff. Ben is in jail. He's just kind of pushed off to the side. We are getting closer and closer to New Warriors become part of the Spider-Man office, and suddenly they start to factor in, which is bananas when you think about it. There's nothing about the New Warriors that should have any connection with Spider-Man, and yet they're about to be.
Yeah. This volume will be, I suppose, volume 3 when it comes out in Epic format, and it has issue 400. So no matter what, issue 400 is a great issue, and people who are interested in the era, sure, I absolutely agree that they should get this issue. There's this volume, there's stuff for them, but yeah, 400 is the gem here. So at least, if nothing else, you have one really solid issue in the middle of all the mania.
At least there's
all
one.
The mania.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, guys. For you listening out there, you can email me at comicshenanigans@gmail.com, rate the show on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and listen to us on Spotify. Upcoming episodes include an interview with Jason Liebig, who is really big associate and, he was assistant editor in the X books in the mid-90s. Then he was a full editor on kind of the tertiary X books in the late 90s. So we had a great chat. In fact, he's actually going to be coming back at some point because there was just too much that we couldn't get into after an hour and a half. So he'll be coming back for some more. We have Ariana Marr is coming back as a great creator commentary on an issue of Superman that was recently relaunched, Superman #1. She was the letterer, and she kind of walks us through her process and what she was thinking in terms of how she laid that book out from a lettering perspective. Interviews I haven't done yet, but are at least on the docket, which will be coming out soon. An interview with former DC president Paul Levitz. And then we also have a return appearance by Kelly Thompson, who just got a ton of Eisner Award nominations. I think she got more than Marvel or DC. So good for Kelly Thompson. So a lot of good stuff to talk about in the future. So make sure you download those episodes. And in a month, we'll be talking about Alpha Flight on the Book of the Month Club. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.